Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Power of Our Story. Today, I'm so excited to have Chris Gregorio facilitating the conversation with Chad Bruckner. This is going to be good. Thank you, Chris, for doing this, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here. This is a conversation that needs to be had. We had this once before, and my understanding is that it was one of the most researched, reviewed videos as on betrayal. And I think that it's something at some level everybody's dealing with. And I think that Chad's got a great story in the way he's dealing with it. I have a little bit different perspective on betrayal, which I've come through my own healing of what I used to call betrayal. And I'm really excited. Chad, thank you so much for being here, brother. I know that you're a super impactful guy and demanded everywhere. So thank you for taking the time to be here.
Oh, Chris, thank you, brother. It's an honor to be here with you. Just have a conversation, brother to brother, with in front of our community, and try to share our perspectives and illuminate people's minds, maybe in a way they're not thinking, or add some context to them that makes them understand their experience and what they went through, which I think is important. We can understand some of the stuff that happened to us, but not agree with it or want to like it, but we can understand why it happened, how it happened, and then we can make a plan for it, how to come out of it.
Absolutely. And, to be clear, this isn't a healing session. This is maybe trying to give somebody a roadmap or a path, at least a pebble in the right way, so that you can go forward and move on and start to heal from your traumas and your betrayal. And we're going to focus specifically on institutional betrayal because I think that that's a big headline phrase right now in our industry, first responders and military. Chad, you said that you're in this process of dealing with your betrayal. Do you want to kind of start with what you dealt with in your betrayal, institutional betrayal?
Yeah, absolutely. Take it back just a little bit of my values. And I think it's important when we talk about betrayal. I think it's important because we all come at it from a different perspective. So mine is, my experiences in life, my lived experiences, the way I see the world, the way I perceive the world. Of course, I'm going to react to it differently than anyone on this call would do differently. So, I'm very, when I went in the Army at 17, very mission focused, purpose driven, try to always do the right thing every day, I make a lot of mistakes, but try to be character driven. It's something I'm really mindful about. So when I find myself in situations where I make a mistake, I'm often the first one to say it. And I kind of bring it forward and try to make amends and things like that. So that's kind of how I always approached work life in the military and police. And it really wasn't until I was a little naive, I'll be honest, very naive about the way of the world. I was one of those guys that showed up because I was coming out with my best self or wanting to do the best job. I assume that we're all here trying to, with the same vision, the same mindset. We want to all push together in the same direction. We all want to achieve something. Nobody wants to get the credit more than anybody else. I mean, that's how naive I was, my early 20s in the military. And even through law enforcement, my late 20s and into my 30s, I didn't recognize, sadly, I didn't recognize some of the broken souls around us. I didn't recognize that. And I didn't recognize some of their behaviors. And often I felt like that was on me, or maybe I contributed to that. I think being an empath and just being naturally compassionate, wanting to sometimes carry the burden for people when it's not even my burden to carry, it's theirs. So that's kind of my ethos and my mindset. So kind of going into the policing career at the end of would have been the 11th year, end of my 11th year, in my 11th year. And I was a detective then, and I got caught up in a situation where, again, the way I say it, it's like playing a video game and not knowing the rules. So if we're going to play on this video game, we're going to play a Madden, and you're going to put it on All Pro or on Rookie, and I put it on All Pro. I mean, I'm not going to be fair competitor because I don't know what I'm doing. And that's kind of what I equate the politics of policing at the end of my career. The last 18 months was being a detective, getting reassigned unknowingly back to patrol. For me, I made a double attempted homicide arrest the night before I got demoted, and the next morning I got called into. Lieutenant came up and said, "Hey, Chief went to see," and I got called to the Chief's office and unemotionally sat me down and just said, within a 5-minute conversation, "We're sending you back to patrol." And I remember I thought I was going to get an attaboy, like a pat on the back. That's why I was going to his office. And I remember just having a single tear roll down my cheek because I couldn't process what was going on. I had no idea. I remember the only thing I said to him, I said, "Chief, if you think I'm best served in the patrol where I started my career," because I was a detective, an expert in multiple areas, making doing a lot of good things in the community and the county. So I said, "If you think I'm best served being a patrolman where I started my career, then I'll go back and do it the best I can." And shook my hand, and that was it. It was the processing of everything that kind of after that really made me understand about organizational betrayal. That made me really understand about To some people, that is not a big deal. To some people, that's a business decision. To some people, that's just business as usual, which I understand that. And I think having conversations about how we perceive things, I think is really important, because I perceive that as somebody that puts their hand on the Bible and took an oath 11 years earlier. To me, I felt like that oath, I was violated by the very oath that I took from my own department. There was no conversation. And let me back up. The main reason that happened was in early in 2019, our department gave a sergeant's test, an administrative sergeant's test, and the process was ripe, and in our opinion, was ripe with flaws. And the chief changed the process. It was an all new process at this time, and it was the first time we've gone through something like this. We went from an objective kind of scoring process to a subjective scoring process. Meanwhile, I was a very senior person at that time. I was working on my master's, just about to get it. And, some of the guys were like, "Oh, this is your time, Chad. You're going to," and me and another guy. So there was just some momentum working in that favor. It was kind of the next progression. I got from patrol in 4 years to detective, and I did that for 7, 8 years. And it was time that the next phase would be sergeant. So it just everything kind of seemed natural. So when we got the results back and I was second to last from the bottom, barely passed it, barely made enough to move on to the interview. It was just, I remember sitting in that test. I'll tell you why. And actually, this is something I never talked about. You have an hour to do the test. And it's one of those in-basket assessment tests. And it's done by a company that, it's run by a police leader who has a lot of turnover in their own department, not a high retention department. Yet this is somebody we call on to promote our sergeants from the area departments. And I remember you get an hour to write this thing. You have to read all these memos. Some are really easy. Some are really challenging. And they tell you you're probably not going to get them all done. And you have 1 hour, and we want to test your ability to prioritize leadership and all that stuff. Chris, I got this, man. And I took literally, until they said 60 minutes, pens down. I was the last one there. Threw my pen down. I completed every memo. I hit them all. I gave you tertiary responses in case the first option wouldn't work and the second option wouldn't work. I'll give you a tertiary option. I left there flying cloud nine because I prepared. I was ready for the next journey. When I got those results, I barely passed it. And then I tried to start conversations with the department about that. And you're starting to realize, and again, I didn't know the rules. So I started to realize, like, they want me to get promoted, right? I assume my department wants me to get promoted. Why wouldn't they want me to get promoted? And then you start to ask those questions for the first time in my life at 39 years old. Do they want me to get promoted? Does my chief want me to get promoted? When you start to ask that for the first time in my life, it was such a moral injury because I didn't know the answer to that. And that was scary for me. You start to realize other people started to make comments. Guys, this test wasn't a right test. I think they were doing something shady, And you start to ask more questions. So to sum this up, so we put some light on this process. We filed a memo with the borough council, the testing company. We wanted some answers. We wanted to see all the records. What were your grading rubrics? Like, what were your standards? How did this be? Because everybody that didn't pass it, by the way, filed a memo. It wasn't just me. But of course, me being an informal, influential guy, I took that on the chin. I didn't realize that was going to happen. So that's a lesson of, if you're going to speak up, now I learned, be ready to take those arrows. So because in my mind, again, getting back, I always wanted to do the right thing. I assumed whatever agency, military unit, whatever I'm in, they would want me to do the right thing. That's what we expect. So when I bring something to the organization that is improper, I guess I expected to be celebrated for. Hey, thanks for bringing that to our attention. I did not expect, to find myself in the middle of the chief's crosshairs from that. And that destroyed me. That destroyed me because I was always the guy chosen for the hard missions, trusted with the most confidential secrets, expected to get the first crack at the hardest mission, and now I was the guy kind of in the target hairs being investigated for stuff I didn't even do. That happened later. And it was a brutal final 18 months. And I think being positive through all that, wanting to be positive, wanting to be accountable and take ownership, which I always try to do, I kept saying, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. They're not really coming after me. Maybe it's me. Maybe I messed up. Maybe I misperceived something. You kind of keep telling yourself that to kind of keep momentum going. But I left policing after 13 years. I put a 3-week notice in, almost like I was working at a fast food restaurant. I mean, this is supposed to be my career, and I just was getting my master's. I thought I was working to be a sergeant, then a chief, and then I put my 3 weeks notice in like I was working at a deli, and I rolled out and got into entrepreneurship. So I was devastated. I perceived, and this is an improper perception, I perceived that everybody was laughing about me, that everybody was ridiculing me. that I was the water cooler conversation of, do you see this guy who was doing really well, and now, you know, he got demoted back from detective to patrol, and I just assumed that it was like I had so much shame about it, personal shame. So I couldn't see. You almost can't see the situation for what it is in the moment because you're dealing with I was dealing with so many emotions. It was after the fact that I was started to heal, really process the event, and you see kind of the layers to the humanity. To think in an organizational betrayal incident that it doesn't take two to tango is a silly thing, because it took me to be involved in that, just like it took the chief. You know, it took me to speak up and say something, just like it took him to respond to it. So, you know, if we're going to get into ethics or morality, that's one thing. But, you know, I did take action, and that's going to, you know, when you're in a culture that's not the best, you're going to have to deal with that. And those are hard lessons that I'm glad I learned, because I wasn't prepared to learn them then, and I learned them now. So that's going to make me much more prepared in the future. But yeah, I think, Chris, I think betrayal, man, is layered, it's deep, and I know we talked about that before. What's your perspective on that?
You know, betrayal is a weird thing. I think that maybe I experienced it for the first time in the military as a young kid. But as soon as I felt that it was betrayal, I was so fortunate to have leaders that I felt betrayed me. uh, and I'll flip the word from betrayal to punishment because I stepped on it in some sort of way. And then they took care of me, and they didn't just let me flop in the wind by myself. They still put their wing over me and brought me back in and mentored me through those things. That doesn't necessarily happen in most civilian environments. And if I'm honest about it, it doesn't happen in most military environments either. I think that that's one of the huge key differences between leadership and management, right? Is the care for your people, and knowing the difference between the two. And then in my civilian police career, where I've spent 20 years and I hopefully got another 15 or so more, if everything goes right. As soon as I got off of field training, I was working an overtime event. I won't go into the details just for the sakes of anonymity, but was working a huge event in our town, was ordered to do some things because there was going to be a lot of gang violence, as there always was, a lot of shootings, a lot of fights. And we were ordered to take gang paraphernalia if they were flying it around or whatever. And I was working with a guy that had been on 20 some years. He goes, "Hey, kid, we're not doing that shit." I was like, "Okay, man, I'm here to learn. You tell me." You know, I'm following. I think I've got, might be 2 months off of FTO field training, right? Where I'm just on my own for the first couple months. And now this was my first overtime ability to work on the department. So I was excited. Oh, cool. We're going to do this police work. There's going to be this gang violence. We're going to get to crush it, all these things. Cool. So we're going through most of the day and nothing really happens. And then all of a sudden, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon hits, and there's fight after fight after fight. And there were several shootings and a couple stabbings. And then he's like, "All right, kid, we're going to start. Obviously, this is a thing now. We're going to start enforcing these things." So he contacts this guy, takes his little bandana or whatever, and it turns into a little bit of a argument. And the guy's really upset. He's like, "Sorry, man, go make a complaint." So the guy did go and make a complaint. He went from a bunch of different sergeants, and they're like, "Hey, man, sorry, this is what we're doing. It's violence. You know, we don't want anybody perceived as a gang member. It's actually helping you out, blah, blah, blah." Well, then he gets to this other sergeant who I had never met before. He's like, "Okay, yeah, I hear you. Well, do you want me to handle this? Or," and this man explained it to me this way, so it's not a hearsay. He's like, "Or you can file a complaint with internal affairs and we'll do a full investigation and you know, get down to what happened." He goes, "I want to do that." Long and short of it, they do their investigation and I end up reprimanded. Me and this guy end up reprimanded for doing what we were ordered to do. And I'm like, "Well, I'm fine because we were ordered to do this." Well, they're like, "Well, no, through the interview, this person says, well, I've never said that." And this is a senior level guy, right? And despite several other sergeants and other officers saying, "Yeah, this was a room of 300 cops or something like that, 200 or 300 cops in this briefing that were all told the same thing." And so I ended up with a letter of reprimand. I was like, "Wow, okay, this is eye opening. I guess I can't just orders and be safe. I have to evaluate these things, right?" And you know, you learn this in the military as well. You don't have to follow illegal or orders, right? Well, I didn't find this to be illegal or unmoral or unethical. But I was like, "Wow, okay. I've been on the job 3 months and I got a letter of reprimand." And it's because, from my perspective, somebody lied about an order. I'm like, "Okay." So that was my introduction to what we would today call institutional betrayal, because there was a true lie, right? I gave them this power to believe like you. I felt that everybody felt like me. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to go crush crime. As long as I do what I'm told, I'm protected. Without realizing it, at that moment, I realized that it's like anything else. It's a machine, right? It's, as you said, it was an
Mhm.
unemotional thing, and it is for this process, right? I work at a large department, so there's not like, for most people, there's not a really big bond between the officers and everybody, right? It's I won't say the number, but it's a large department. So, for me, well, we'll go into my perspective here in a minute, but you had said something that I want to question you on. Um, Part of the betrayal thing comes to morale as well. And I think that a large part of, people think that people are leaving these professions because of pay or accountability or things like that. Some people think that they're leaving, and some people are leaving because of the politics of it and what people are saying. But people are still willing to do this job. But where the morale and some of the betrayal comes from, and again, I'm going to get off of this because I don't feel that this is betrayal, is that most people do this job because they have some sort of moral compass. They feel drawn and driven to do this job, right? To do good, to save people, to help people. That is their entire focus. Not to see how many people I can put in jail or who I can hurt, right? That's not your forte every morning when you wake up. What can I get into today, and who can I hurt and arrest? That's TV, right?
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
but now people are being punished for doing what their moral compass says to do, right? Even though your policy might not necessarily dictate it or the laws might not dictate it, it's dictated through public opinion. It's dictated through punishments handed down from different internal investigative units, right? And then sometimes it is dictated by law or policy. Just as a broad thing, I think most people think that drugs are a bad thing for people, but you have states like Washington, Oregon, Colorado that legalize it. And so your moral compass will be like, hey, we got to stop this stuff. But the law tells you you can't, it's all legal. So just as a kind of a frame there.
Yeah,
Um,
interesting.
and for your perspective, and this is a normal one, and I want to ask you why you think this way, because would you agree that patrol is kind of the backbone of police work?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it.
I've been doing this for 20 years, man. I still love patrol. And I think that you probably love patrol too, which is why you said what you said. Chief, if you feel that this is where I'm best served and I can best serve the department, okay, cool. But for some reason, and it goes back to what your perception was, is what everybody was like, oh, Chad's a laughing stock. He's back in patrol. Why why did you feel that being in patrol was a punishment? Because, like, if you're in some of these specialty units, they're like, okay, one of the first things is we're going to give you some time off and we're going to send you back to patrol. I experienced that myself. Or we're taking you out of this unit and putting you somewhere else, right? Why do you think that we look at patrol as something that's the core foundation of one of the things of reasons why we do this job? Why do we now, once we move on from that, why do we look at that as a punishment?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I never actually thought about it. I don't know that it was a punishment. I looked at it as removing something that I love to do. Like I loved being a detective. I was an expert in 3 areas. I think to this day, I'm the only detective in that county that was an expert in 3 different areas. So I just loved the job. I was good at it. I worked hard at it. I cared about the outcomes. I cared about serving people. So it's just a passion. It was all lined up. I was getting my master's in digital forensics at that time, so it was a lot of day hours, and so it just really was a life upender kind of decision. Which I think, in hindsight and reflection, looking back on having time to do that, that was intentional. That was an intentional thing to upend my life and cause a little discomfort and pain. So that's, I think, where the emotional attachment for me is. I didn't want to go back to patrol my own. That would have been fine. It was kind of being forced to do it to, make my life a little challenging, a little uncomfortable. And there were other things that happened during that time. I had to turn my cell phone in. So I was told, you're going to go back for a year, and then you're going to come back. And I said, oh, okay, just a year, and yeah. But then that turned 18 months, and then 18 months went by, and then I was told to turn my detective phone in, and I was sent via email, very unemotional. Hey, turn your detective phone in. So, and I said, well, I thought I'm coming back, and so you start to realize that's when I started okay, this is something bigger. This is not just you know, a collaborative decision. This is unfortunately some I'm caught up in
Politics.
something. Yeah, politics. You know, I tell this story because it's a great example. It was June of 2020. It was right after the George Floyd stuff. So COVID's in full force. And I was a shift supervisor Friday night. It was June of 2020. Beautiful Friday night in the northeast of the country. And I think we had 4 or 5 cops on that night, 30-man department. And I was shift supervisor, and there were protesters. As soon as we got on duty at 6 p.m., maybe about 7 p.m. on a Friday night, nice, June, so it's warm outside, it's light outside. And there were probably 50 protesters in the middle of Main Street. I worked in a borough, kind of an urban area, so it was a main street in town. And they're right in the middle of Main Street. They got their signs, and they're, kind of blocking a lane, but not, we kind of all know what those riots were. It wasn't a riot, it was a protest, but they were trying to incite, and things like that. So being a Friday night, as the members of the borough council were driving down Main Street and seeing this, they were just offended that people were in the streets and, how dare they? This is our town. So they end up messaging the chief, and then the chief ends up calling me. And I write about this in my book because I put the quote in there because I don't remember it off the top of my head. I'll paraphrase it, but I remember being so visceral in me. And I remember kind of explaining to him, telling me, "There's borough council just called me." And he's yelling at me. Borough council just called. There's protesters in the street. I don't give a shit what you do. If you have to rip him out of the fucking street, you go get him out of there. So I sat there and I took a breath on the phone and I said, okay, well, we're not going to go start ripping people out of the streets and make CNN. That's not going to happen. And I talked to the squad about it, and I told them what the game plan is going to be, that I'm going to go out by myself. I'm going to call out with it. I'm going to try to meet with the organizer by myself, park my car away, walk up on foot. I'm going to try everything I can to put myself in a collaborative light. No guarantees or expectations, as we all know, that could be met, given what was going on in the country at that time. I said, but you guys are not coming out there, and we're not taking any enforcement action unless I call out, I'm getting assaulted or something like that. And that was the decision I made. So I go out, and of course, what do you think happened with the organizer? I think she just, oh, sure, we'll move out of the road. She's like, no, screw you, pig. Got the bullhorn in my face. I said, okay, well, thank you very much. She's a young girl. I said, thank you very much. Have a great night. And I sat in my car and I watched them for about a half hour. And I saw the storm clouds come in. And I said, you know what? Let's just see what happens. And the rain comes in, and they all leave within 30 minutes and maybe an hour. And I went back, and everything was fine. We continued all our night. But I know from having some experience of leading combat missions, knowing what leadership is and how to deal with stuff. Like, what if I wasn't that guy? What if I was inexperienced, or I was another officer that had less experience, and the chief's yelling at me what to do? You're going to go do it. You're going to go do it. Or you're going to have that thought in your head, oh, the chief's mad. He's yelling at me. Like, if they don't get in the street, I got to get him out of the street. So I'm going to do it. I mean, how that happens every day in this country. It's only because I had to have that intuition to say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do the opposite of what this leader says. So again, just doing what you think is right. And that's a moral injury. You have to and the guys, I think, appreciated that. They said, hey, thanks for doing that. We appreciate that. The last thing anybody wanted to do in June of 2020, a month after Chauvin, was be on the news again. Nobody wanted that. And we all remember what that was like. So, yeah, I think that betrayal.
You just said a word.
Yeah.
I want to ask you if there's a difference. You said moral injury. Is there a difference? If so, what's the difference between moral injury and betrayal?
Man, that's a great question. I think because I think betrayal is very layered. That chief telling me to go do that, to me, that's an act of betrayal. You're putting me in harm's way and the squad in harm's way because you're emotionally upset that borough council's calling you, giving you shit. Like, that's your shit. You got to deal with that and be a leader, take a breath. But you just put that on us, and so that, to me, that's a form of betrayal. It's our job's hard enough, and I have to do that. But I don't view it as betrayal as like institutional betrayal. To me, that's more of a moral injury. So I think they're kind of all. I think it's case by case specific, and I think it's.
Kind of tied together.
I think it comes down to your perception and your individual characteristics, your environment, how you grew up, how you perceive the world, what trauma you've been through. I mean, I think that's all relative, and that's why it gets back to it takes two to tango. Somebody can absolutely take an act against you, but it's still, you're the receiver of it, and now you have to make a response. What you're going to do, it takes two to tango, and it's an unfortunate thing if you're on the receiving end of that, because you have to make a response what you're going to do.
I love it. And before we go on, I just want to tell everybody that this betrayal thing, if nothing else, if you don't get anything out of this, look at all the people on here and all the heads and nodding. Everybody experiences it. So if I want to take some of the shame away, It's not a weak thing for you to have to deal with because everybody's dealt with it. Everybody is dealing with it at some sort of level. Like Chad said, it's a very layered thing, right? It's a very layered thing, and it's a very impactful thing. I think we talked before we got on here that I talked to a lot of people across the country that have and on my job that are close to suicide or having those suicidal ideations. And the two biggest words that always come up is betrayal and shame. And I want to make clear that, what Chad and I is saying here isn't the gospel. We're talking about two very different perspectives on how we perceive things and then how we deal with them. So, and for me, and maybe to be completely blunt, it might be some just semantics, taking the word away. I don't want to give that damn word betrayal the power, the emotional power that it hurts so many people so badly that they want to take their lives. So just to be completely frank, it might be semantics, but for me, and we'll get into it a little bit here, that's how I heal from that and kind of take ownership and take away that power from that word. And I'm not going to give that power to anybody. But Chad,
Chris, can I interject? Can I piggyback on that?
Yes.
Because this reminds me of a conversation I had, and I think it's important too, because there could be people in the same organization who perceive that event differently. One person could say it was betrayal, another person's like, dude, that wasn't betrayal. What are you talking about, right? And it's like, whoa. So my partner was one of my best friends. So I say this because we're very different, our personalities, but our values and ethos are very similar in the way we approach service. So we get along very well, even though we're very different. And we were detectives together. We were partners together. We both actually went through this demotion experience together. I can only speak about my experience. But what's interesting, and I share this is because I put this in the book, is when I started using the word demotion, he would tell me, bro, you weren't demoted. You were reassigned back to patrol. And I said, hold on. Let me explain this to you. This is my opinion. This is where it comes to perception. The day I got promoted, my chief, who's the former chief, said, hey, congratulations. Why are you congratulating me? On your new job, on the job where you're it's a lateral promotion, but you're moving up. I remember on Facebook, congratulations to Detective Bruckner, from Patrol Detective. So if we want to do that, we don't get to do the other way and kind of slowly peel back when you do the opposite. If you want to promote me, then you're going to have to own that you demoted me. I get back to the words, and my partner was like, well, dude, you're just making it seem like worse than it is. I was like, no, I want to give the decision makers, and this could be some of my brokenness, but I want to put the onus of the decision makers back on them. You made that decision. I didn't make it. I didn't come to you. So if we want to say, hey, we got promoted to detective, and then you want to make the personal decision to demote me, I'm going to use that word demote, even though I didn't do anything for cause, even though that word demote sounds a little negative connotation. I'm not ashamed of that. I'll use that because to me, in my perspective, that is what I went through. So I do think words matter, and being comfortable in a space to not have shame, and just that's how I see the situation. I've reflected a lot on it. And I think there's confidence that comes in when you see it for what you think it's true.
And for you, the way you viewed that position, it was a promotion, right? Just as a dog handler, I was like, although it is just another patrol assignment, for me, that's a promotion because that's elevating me to something towards my life goal, right?
Of course.
Now,
of course.
organizationally or institutionally, sure, maybe it is a lateral transfer, but there is, it's been ripped away from you, whether it's a punishment or demotion, whatever you want to call it, it has impact.
Right. Exactly. And I think when we give people the out, see, I'm a positive guy. I'm a service-minded guy, like you are. I get that. And most of the people in this call, that's how we find each other. We love service. We love people. So
now let me say,
I think
now we are now.
Right. But I think we want to give people that onus. We want to give them that out. That's just what compassionate people and empathetic people do. So I think there's a great care that we have to do if we're on the receiving end of that stuff, to kind of stand up and say, no, I'm not, I'll forgive you. I can be compassionate to why because something must have happened. You don't want to kind of hurt somebody like that. But you also have to own this too. That's on you. You made these decisions. And sometimes in the peer space, we're like, oh, it's okay. They're going through a tough time. We understand that. And I think that's okay to have that mindset. But I think both things can be true, that we also have to put the onus on people, that the broken people to heal themselves and fix themselves by owning their behavior.
Ownership. And I'm going to fast track this because we're starting to run low on time. I was going to ask, what does betrayal require? Betrayal generally requires, and then I'll read a different definition to it, but it requires trust between two entities, right? Two people, a person, an organization, or whatever. And for me, an organization is an inanimate object, right? So for me, I can't be betrayed by the organization. I can be betrayed by several people within the layers of the organization, but the city or the department or your, whatever your company is, for me, I'm not going to give you that power to where I'm going to say that inanimate object can betray me. Now, when you come on and you seem like me, and I unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I got that eyes wide open. Hey, here's what this job really is. A couple months out of FTO, right? Unfortunately, it took you till, what was it, year 11, 10, something like that before.
Yeah.
So when you got hired, did you have this Goldilocks vision of your department, of law enforcement in general? Like, hey, I'm going to do this great job, and as long as I'm doing my best, I'm always going to be okay. Did you have that implied trust in that process?
Oh, absolutely. I was coming out of the military. I mean, I was only, I think I was 18 months out of the military, just coming back from combat. So my values and ethos were through the roof about do the right thing. And so I just assumed I actually came out like number one on 2 or 3 tests, and I got 2 or 3 offers in the same week. And I had to pay myself through the academy, through the VA GI Bill, and I didn't have any offers. So then I got multiple in the same week. I was blessed to do that. And then, so I took this job at an agency that was from my hometown. It was the smallest one of the 3 offers. And that ended up probably being, I'm grateful for it all. I don't regret any of it. But when you go to a small agency, I learned now, you have to deal with the small time politics. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen at all big, like your department. I think it's on a bigger level. You still see the same stuff, just on a bigger level, but you have less lateral movement. You have less, you just have less people at a small agency. So you might only have one person blocking your way or in your way, but that person could be the chief of police, and they will make your life, difficult and challenging. So, but yeah, I had that rose-colored glass on for sure, Chris. I just thought, hey, we're doing a job. We're putting our life on the line for somebody. Like, I never for a second did anybody warn me about inter-office politics or, I even put this in my book that at the end of my career, I was more fearful of what was going on inside the police department than what was going on in the community. And I wonder how many cops or first responders can agree with that, given where they're working at and the culture there. So
Yeah,
that's just a reality. It's a hard reality to admit, but I had a great relationship with the community. I was not one of those fearful guys, but at the end, I was terrified to drive back to the station. I had anxiety. I would sit in the car for 10 minutes.
yeah, and this probably won't land with most of us on here, because most of us on here have gray hair. Some of us have no hair. We're at the end of our career. We're afterwards, right? But one of the things that I was told when I got on is, careful, kid. The department will never really hunt you, but if you lay it out there, they're going to smack the shit out of you. So be careful. Keep that shield up. And for people just entering this line of work, in any first responder realm, whether it's law enforcement or firefighting, even the military, understand that probably they're not going to, at the time, they're not going to hunt you down. But it's a political machine, and it's going to do what's best for the optics of the organization, whatever that is. And I would say that it's the same thing for corporate America. So don't, and this isn't to be jaded, this is just real life advice here. Whatever career you're going into, do not give this blind sense of trust. Don't put on this, hey, there's this brand new coat. It's going to keep you warm and keep you protected. Don't do that. Accept it. Be gracious. This is awesome. Cool. I've got this opportunity. But understand the machines, the way they run, and it's supposed to be this way, if I'm quite frank, right? It's like if one of us passes on or whatever, you retire, it doesn't skip a beat. No matter how great we think that we are, it doesn't skip a beat. The military, right? Next man up, next man up. It's supposed to be that way, so that one of us falls, the machine still keeps going and you can still be successful. Now that means that sometimes we get chewed up in the process of that, right? So don't blindly give that trust to your organization. Don't blindly give that trust to your chiefs or your CEOs. Don't do it. Understand that if it's you or them, or you or the organization, it's going to be them or the organization that are going to prevail, right? You're probably going to have to, if you were wronged in some sort of way, file lawsuits to become whole, right? So, we've transferred on to that's institutional betrayal, and my definition is this trust that we had talked about. But there's, in academia, they always try to make it much more, they want to put their own stamp on it so they can get their doctorates and all these things. So here's what this one says. Institutional betrayal is a concept described by psychologist Jennifer Freyd, referring to wrongdoings perpetrated by an institution upon individuals dependent on that institution, including failure to prevent or respond supportively to wrongdoings by individuals. So wrongdoing, how many people have been done wrong by somebody? And that's one of the things that I go to. I can say that, man, I got screwed over, or this wasn't fair, right? But then I'll jump back to, and this is my healing again, what my mom always told me: life, kid, life ain't always fair, son. You're gonna take some on the chin, and it ain't right, and you might not ever be made whole, but that's just life. And law enforcement, and I'm guessing fire, and Jim, you can jump on here a little bit later and or shake your head and see if this is true. You learn by screwing up, and you were always encouraged to screw up as long as you didn't make the same mistake repeatedly, right? You learn from it. I think sadly those days are done, because everything's captured on video now, and now everybody has to be accountable for something at some level, right? And every single one of these videos is PDRable. So they're like, hey, we encourage you to make mistakes and learn from them, but understand you're also going to be punished at the same time, right? This time we're going to give you a letter of reprimand. Next time it might be 7 days off. So you can feel, and for me, the ownership, Chad, you brought that up so well, is the ownership. You own the power that you're going to give, right? We talked about happiness. I'm not going to give anybody else the power over me to control my happiness or impact that. I'm going to choose that. I'm going to choose to work at that every single day. Same thing with this. You can feel that you were screwed over, but if I can, a Jocko's thing here, extreme ownership, if there's even a microcosm of a percentage of ownership that I can take in some sort of realm, could I have done this different or that different? Then I'm like, okay, well, I screwed that up, or I could have done better on that. Do I necessarily believe it deserves punishment? Do I believe that it deserves a super high punishment of being kicked out of a detective unit or whatever? Hell no. But at least for me, when I was a kid and I stepped on it and I got in trouble, I didn't get to choose my punishment. So for me, part of the way I heal, okay, if I can take a little bit of ownership of it, and I got kicked out of this unit, or I got time off, or I got a letter of reprimand, I don't have to agree with that punishment, but at least I had some sort of step in it, and there's something that I could have done, and I just didn't get to choose my consequences. What do you think about that, Chad?
No, absolutely. I think, and I've done a lot of reflecting on my experience, but I think, and I kind of alluded this earlier, it takes multiple people to tango. It really does. Most of us are not really victims at anything, especially if we're people that are trying to do the right thing and we have confidence and inner peace and courage. We're going to put ourselves in situations to advocate for others and do what we think is right. By proxy, we're going to have conflict, and we have to be accepting of that conflict. And that's the biggest lesson I probably took of all this is, if you're going to open your mouth and you're going to do what you think is right, just be willing to take that on the chin. And I wasn't as resilient as I wanted to be at that time. I wish I could have handled that a little bit better, but I'm grateful for it all, man, because the lessons I've learned from that, and the wisdom. I think the wisdom I've gotten from that is something that I wouldn't have gotten if I didn't go through it, unfortunately. And it requires to be wise. You have to be humbled. You have to be humbled. You have to go through experiences that, maybe somebody did something unkind to you, but maybe you did something unkind to them, or and then you start to realize, man, maybe this is messier than I thought. And there's just a humbling process that comes with healing and growing. But I think that's where you get the wisdom, and that's kind of how we generate the learning lessons and the momentum to overcome those. So betrayal is hard, man. Betrayal is deep, and I think everybody on the betrayal side might act like they were also the one victimized, which is interesting as well. If you ask my former chief, I don't know, but maybe he thinks he's victimized in some way. And I think that's interesting how people can get those perspectives. That's why conversations are so important. That's why making amends are so important. It takes two people to be willing to do that. But I think that can have a lot of healing power of people kind of coming together and making amends. You don't have to understand it, but man, coming together and finding a way to bury the hatchet and move forward, I think can be healing for everybody involved.
100%. Again, that's just taking the power back, right? It's not giving somebody the power. I'm not going to allow somebody to make me a victim if I don't want to be a victim. Fuck you. You might have, sorry about the language, you may have got a shot on me, and I'm going to be that guy, at least I hope, right? In the moment that I can fight back. Okay, you got me, you knocked me down. I'm still in this fight. I'm not going to give it to you, buddy. Sorry. And you know what? That doesn't mean I'm going to say necessarily screw you in your face, right? It might be like, All right, man. No, I get it. I totally understand. In one area that I'll kind of caveat this a little bit, and it seems so unpredictable, but it kind of is the area of politics. When you get into politics, man, you might not have anything on your radar and you're completely blindsided. But again, I think that if you come into these professions with a little bit of that shield, arm's length distance about your level of trust, maybe it doesn't have so much of an emotional impact on you. And again, that's not saying that you haven't been screwed over, but don't give them that power over you to where it hurts so bad that you have to call somebody because you're at the end of your wits. You have to call somebody, and please call somebody. My phone's always on. I've had people reach out to me, strangers on LinkedIn, because they needed to talk. They had that courage in the moment, right? Before they're going to take these pills, or they've got this gun in their hand and they're getting ready to put it in their mouth. Reach out to somebody. But if we can do something before you ever get to that, and that's not allowing people that close to you to where they have that touch to your soul, right? That's what they had with you, Chad, right? You made it to the pinnacle of what you wanted. They had touched your soul because they've helped you or allowed you, or whatever verbiage you want to use, to obtain your dream. And then it was ripped away, right? Don't give somebody that power. I wish this is such a long form conversation, man. We could sit here for 2
No,
or
this
3
is
hours
good,
and do
man.
this,
And
man.
I think we should go also talk about forgiveness. I think forgiveness is a very powerful part of the healing process of betrayal. It just is. And I don't know that you can heal all the way until you forgive. I don't know that you can do it. I mean, I don't know, but I haven't been able to do it. I've now done it, but it took me probably in the last 6 months to finally and I beat it into my head. I wrote it down on Post-it notes. I'll leave reminders for myself to say before I go to bed, to say forgiving prayers before I go to bed, just so I can move on, because I'm doing that for me. I'm doing that for my family and my healing. Because I do forgive that person. I do forgive because I do know some of the things he's been through. I know some of the experiences. So I think forgiving is all, because you kind of talked about carrying that burden, not shedding that chip, not burying the hatchet for yourself. Man, that's a lonely, hard road to walk, and it doesn't get any easier the further you go down it. I think it gets harder, more treacherous. So find a way to shed that, man. Bury the pain. Find your inner peace, heal, forgive, move on. Like you said, people are going to do it. It's not going to be the last time someone's going to betray me. It's not going to be the last time someone's going to betray any of us on this call. So just look at it as, a learning lesson. Okay, I learned a very hard lesson, and I'll be much more prepared next time. There's I have a picture in my office. I won't show you now because I have to flip my camera out, but it speaks to my journey, and it's a graphic I found online. I just blew it up, but it's pictures of two wolves. One's laying next to it with one arrow, and it's like withered away and it's dead from one arrow in the back. And the wolf next to it is the same size, but it's got this snarl look in its face, and it's standing upright, and it's kind of looking in the camera at you like what? And as you look up, you're like, oh my God, you get drawn in by the face, and then you look at his back. He's got like 20 arrows in his back, this wolf, and he's smiling in the camera because he took all these arrows. And it was a good lesson for me, because I felt like the wolf taking one arrow, and I withered. I was unable to kind of weather that and embrace that challenge, and it made me leave the police department. I kind of ran away, so to speak. And so now I see this wolf with these 20 arrows or whatever in the back, and I look up and I say, yep, okay, well, I had to get there. You have to get there. There's a journey to get to that point.
Or you grew and you've got all those arrows in your back and your battlefield just changed. Right. And that's the other thing I'll say. And Sarah, you can attest to this. When we were at the Wounded Blue last year, one of the common themes was, I used to be this warrior. I used to be. I stood up and said something real quick about, look, you guys are all here. You came here to heal, but you're sharing your stories, and look at everybody. And there was physiological differences in people. Some people came there and they were kind of like this. And after people started sharing, and after they shared, they were lighter. They were smiling. There was a young lady named Kim, I'll leave her last name out, that has a physiological issue with her nerves and was shaking. After she told her story so bravely, the next morning she came down and she had to use these sticks to walk. She was walking without these sticks and she wasn't shaking at all. She had shed so much emotionally.
Wow.
Just because our paths changed doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you were weak. It doesn't mean you didn't take arrows. Maybe a sniper got you in a bunch of them and they hit your second chance vest, so you're still around, but you didn't pick that up. You are now, had that not happened, Chad, and I want to give you a plug here for your book. Writing this book and being able to travel across the country. And you know what? Maybe your days of running and gunning on the street and finding homicide suspects is done. I know mine is now as a supervisor. But you know what? For me, now I'm a warrior on the battlefield as a leader to fight the administration to take care of my people. You are in a position that you are now taking care of on a national level, not some small town that you speak of, right? And Northeast USA, but on a national level, probably on it. Well, I can say in this format on an international level. You're saving people. You're giving people. This storytelling is so powerful. Not to be corny with the power of our story, but it is. It saves lives. It changes people's perspectives. And you know what? It lets them know that they're not alone. And I just want to say one more thing, and I'm going to shut up here and pass it back to you, Chad, and then we'll take a couple questions. But, you know, when you said forgiveness, forgiveness is powerful. And you know what? Sometimes the forgiveness is for you rather than the other person. It allows you to be able to let go. I know that that worked for me. And here's a secret. They don't even have to know that you forgave them, right? I happen to be able to look somebody in their face and shake this person's hand and give them a hug. And I was very stoic in the moment and I was happy, but that hurt me afterwards, but it also released me and freed me. I'm not going to allow this person to have that negative impact on me. And I just smiled in his face or her face, right? And it's like, oh, you're good? Yeah, I'm good, man. I get it. I get it, man. I totally get it with a smile on my face. So, you know, you can forgive and they never know it. That's one level of the layer of being able to process and to recover. But if you get to the position where you can actually look somebody in the face and say, I forgive you, or at least be stoic enough and professional enough, and I say that word for your emotion, that there's so much weight that's going to be lifted off of you. Chad, one last word from you, and then we'll, I think Paul's got a quick question. And I know you got to go. But before you start, what's the name of your book? Put that out there.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. It's The Holy Trinity of Successful and Healthy Police Organizations, Improving Leadership, Culture, and Wellness. And I basically just write that to have really successful police organizations, which you could say any organization, and successful, I mean, we're performing well, turnover is low, we're fulfilling our needs in the community, relationships are high. To do that, you have to have good leaders that are well and healthy, which are contributing to an overall organizational culture that is about the team and not one person. So you can't really get there unless we're healthy as leaders to create that. And the one thing I want to say that you touched on it earlier, Chris, and I think it's important, is taking these decisions personally. I took my situation extremely personally. I mean, so personally, because it was personal to me. Like, I sacrificed family time to work. I sacrificed money to go serve the community. It was very personal to me. And I think you're right to say that. You shouldn't take it personally. So I think it gets back to, there are some people that work that job that are more concerned about their contract and their time off. And then there's guys like me and probably you that are also more concerned with taking care of the guys, doing right for the community. So almost you're playing by these different sets of rules, unfortunately. So know that, like, if you're dealing with somebody who is more contract focused, who's more about their time off, who's ambitious and wants to get promoted, might be looking at the situation through the same lens. So it might not be personal to them, but it could be very personal to you. And to understand that, I think would have helped me a long time ago to realize that, because I just took it so personally, thinking that he was also taking it personally. And in hindsight and reflection and prayer and therapy and all that stuff, you realize, no, it was just a business decision.
I'm just
cold and calculated. Yeah, just a number. And I just happen to be that guy. So, not taking it personally. It's great advice. He said, if you can get to that point, not take it personally. That's a huge thing.
And I want to make clear, that's not an easy process to get there, right? I don't want people to feel like, well, I can't just forgive him. I can't just not take it personally. Totally get it. That's going to be through your own process. And again, spiritual prayer, counseling, talking to your friends. And I don't mean counseling necessarily means that you have to go talk to a clinician. Great if you can, but talking to your friends, right? Going back to talk to some of those people that, Chad, you thought you were kind of laughing stock, when you have the ability to do it, when your cup's not so full, do you have the ability to go back and talk with those guys and see what it really is? Was I really? Or are they like, man, that was fucked up, bro. I'm so sorry that happened to you. That takes some of those layers off.
Dude, the crazy thing is, real quick about that is, so I had so much shame about thinking everybody's laughing at this situation. And it's just my perception of it, because I was feeling so ashamed of myself. And you know, a lot of the feedback was like, man, that's crazy, bro. Like you're one of the best detectives here. And the more I heard that, the more I felt like that couldn't be true, because these are people just telling me this to be nice. It's not true, because if I was that good, this wouldn't have happened to me, right? So because I couldn't make that connection that this wasn't a personal decision, that this was just a person that's broken and making a decision, or you know, so that contributed very unhealthy to my emotional health, realizing that I thought people were lying to me, my colleagues were lying to me. And that just shows you my level of brokenness at the time, of how low my self-worth and self-esteem were. So if anybody finds themselves in that situation, just take some deep breaths and hug yourself and realize it's going to be okay. You're a squared away person. You're probably much more gifted than you realize. And in the moment, the world, when it seems like it's falling apart, that's going to end. It's going to pass. It won't last forever.
And you're not alone. Look at all of us that have dealt with the same thing or are dealing with the same thing. In fact, I guess I could say that we're always dealing with the same thing, you know, at least this betrayal thing. But reach out. If it's something that you're struggling with, reach out to the Power of Our Story. Your email will make it down to some of us, and we can connect and talk. Chad, this has been such a impactful conversation. Maybe it's something we can, you know, tap onto and have a second part to this later on. But I
Definitely,
really
brother.
appreciate you being here, man. It's what a pleasure. And one more plug for you. He's going to be at the Wounded Blue, I believe, September 26th through the 29th. I'm going to be there, and I think some other people from the Power of Our Story are going to be there. So if you can join us in Vegas, the Wounded Blue, September 26th through 29th, that will be amazing. Again, Chad's got a great book. It'll be in the link below. And Chad, you want to close out before we kick it over to Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Chris. Thanks, brother, for this is your idea to do this. I think it's a great idea. I think this is such a topic that most of us just don't want to talk about. And even 2 years ago, I probably wouldn't agree to do this with you. So it just took a lot of work and healing to get to a place to talk about it. But I think it can really help others. And I appreciate you doing this, because I think we've all experienced it, and that shame holds us back from talking about it. So if we can be that conduits and help people kind of find their own story, look at their own experience and event, and say, you know what, I'm going to develop a plan through this. It might be a little messy, but I'm going to be okay through that. Man, then this was worth it. And I appreciate you leading on this.
Thanks for helping set the roadmap for me, showing your roadmap for you towards success and healing. And thanks again for your time, Sarah. I'd like to let you end it out, please.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for this conversation. I think because over the years, I've heard so many stories. I love how you guys shared it today. I just want to say too, knowing you guys for years now, especially you, Chris, it's been so cool to see the empowerment that you've gotten through as you've shared your stories and you've, processed the things that happen in your tough career, in your career being a protective person. I have to tell you, Chad, I love that you are the way that you are. I really do. I think, unfortunately, life is just like Chris is saying too. I love the way Chris is too, because, you guys have that integrity. You have that that compass, that moral compass, which we need. We need people to keep bringing that to the forefront, that remember, people, this is what more being caring and caring for people looks like. People who are willing to stand up and protect. I love that you guys are like that. And I also really appreciate, Chris, you sharing that, at some point we really do have to see the reality of where many people are at. And if we can detach ourselves, to the point where we're not going to be harmed, we can see what's going on and realize that, yeah, not everybody has that moral compass. They don't have the courage to have a moral compass. And that is, we have to suffer to learn that, don't we? But I really love you guys. I loved this conversation. I think it's going to help so many people not feel alone and remember that that moral compass is still out there. So thank you so much.
Still operating under it. And I don't know if anybody's ever said this to you, Chad, but I'm going to say this. Thank you for taking the demotion. Thank you for stepping away from the career that you love to now do what you're doing. Again, just because our battlefields change, brother, doesn't mean that we're not a warrior any longer, that we're not in that fight. So thank you for that. I hope that you feel appreciated because you're super impactful, just as you are, Sarah, with setting this up. So thank you so much.